Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Luke's podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts Sheikh Amir and
Alaikum.
Mort. Welcome to the show, everyone. Please be a nice person and comment in the comment section below, or hit that like button. And if you would be so kind, become a patron of ours. This show is entirely supported by you. Patreon.com/The Mad Mamluks. And you can help us out in any way that is good for you. Our show today is with the director of the American Muslims of Palestine. He's a long-known activist in the American Muslim community. He's been arrested and all kinds of different stuff that has happened to him. He's definitely earned his stripes, and we're deeply honored and happy to host him again. He's a returning guest. Taher Herzallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam wa rahmatullah. Privileged to be here.
Well, Taher, a lot of this stuff, the conflict in Palestine, it kind of started in my head when my son came up to me and he said, Baba, I want to wear the keffiyeh and I want to go to school wearing it. I want to support my Palestinian brothers and sisters. And I was really proud and I was so happy that he wanted to do that. But I got worried, honestly. I'm like, wait, what if he starts getting hounded by people about whether he actually supports some of these horrible accusations that they're doing? And then that kind of got me wondering, like, wait, how much are we equipped, like adults, just grown people, when we're talking to people? How are we really well equipped in talking about this subject? And I think that's why you see a lot of people that you'd expect, to show solidarity with Muslims end up becoming quiet. I know there's other factors too, but there's this conflict means to you, and what the past few days have been like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I mean, first of all, I want to say that, I don't blame the community and the average Muslim in America for not knowing how to fully articulate the depth of our feelings and our anger and rage towards what's happening right now in Palestine. I don't blame them. And I think there's a natural affinity that people have with the Palestinian people as a people who are struggling for their freedom and their liberation. But there's also a lot of, of course, deep connection with Palestine as a site of the Aqidah of Islam as well. And so there are deep connections on that sense, and there's also a strong sense of affinity with the Palestinian people. So naturally people are going to feel inclined to express their outrage, and we see that in the mass protests that are taking place all over the country and around the world. But one thing I do want to mention is that the reason why sometimes we find it difficult to address these sticky points that you were alluding to, Sim, is because you have to keep in mind we're dealing with a powerful propaganda machine that seeks to paint Arabs and Muslims as these bloodthirsty animals, that has for decades dehumanized Palestinians, that has for a generation used a well-oiled media narrative that essentially dehumanized Palestinians to such a degree to basically justify their mass murder. And so now we are seeing this machine in full gear, especially in light of the events of the past few days. And so, yes, absolutely, it's going to be difficult to argue because we don't have that well-oiled propaganda machine. We never painted the other side as bloodthirsty mongers. We don't overwhelmingly associate or align an entire group or a community or Muslims or Jews or Christians or anybody of that in that case as bloodthirsty animals that just want to kill the other people around them. But in our case, that's what's been done to us. And so it's been very difficult to argue, to start to talk about the facts of the matter, the context, the historical context, and the more recent context of why this is taking place. When you're having to deal with this uphill battle of trying to explain that, Muslims are human too, and Muslims deserve freedom too, and Palestinians deserve freedom too, and have a right to engage in resistance in any form if they are colonized and they are oppressed and occupied. And so I just wanted to start that discussion with sort of recognizing the difficulty in approaching these issues. And I'm really glad that you're having this session, because this allows us the opportunity to delve into these topics a little bit more deeply and to give the community a sense of how to navigate these discussions in their public circles, in their friend circles, and at work. You guys were talking a little bit before the show about the situation at work and how we're discussing it. And so, and it feels overwhelming. You have, like, for God's sake, you have the NBA Players Association issuing condemnations. You have the MLS, which nobody watches, issuing a condemnation of the situation. The Rock. I mean, what does The Rock have to do with this?
Floyd
Also
Mayweather.
issued his own condemnation, right? So you have Justin Bieber just posted a silly image where he said, "Pray for Israel," but it was superimposed. The words were superimposed on a picture of Gaza destroyed. What? I mean, clearly there's just no logical explanation for how these people are acting, but you see the sort of the global machinery is working really, really well, right? European countries, the states are regurgitating what the Israeli military is saying. You have government officials, everybody's working in tandem. Media is, continuing they basically made an established fact out of a lie that there were beheaded babies and then women were raped. It was a complete lie. There was no substantiated evidence for such a thing ever occurring, but they made it into an established fact. So these are the type of things, these mechanisms they use to further dehumanize Palestinians, to further justify their mass murder. And so when the Israeli general comes out on live TV and says, these human animals, we are going to suffocate them, we're going to put a full blockade and siege on Gaza. Everybody in the world's like, yeah, you know what? I stand with Israel. What? That's a genocidal maniac openly declaring he's going to commit war crimes in public, on national TV, for the whole world to see. And you're applauding him. And the Biden administration is giving him a pat on the back. Green light. You got to deal with these terrorists. That's the kind of language that's being used against us. Barbarism, savagery.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the issue, right? Well, I think I first want to just, first of all, just start this off by saying that it is extremely important to tweet about this, talk about this, and use whatever platform you have to speak about the issue. Because, as you mentioned, they have mainstream media. And that is a very convenient way and an effective way of spreading propaganda, right? And in recent times, one of the reasons why we've been able to kind of push back on this is because of things like Twitter and alternative news sources. People have lost a trust, although they watch it, but they've lost a lot of trust in mainstream media. And it's time for us to take advantage of it. We have to recognize that we live in an age where one tweet can spark a revolution. It's happened before and it can happen again, right? These things
not just that. And I want to make a point here before you finish your point. For the past 15 years, especially after 2008, okay, Israel has been losing the narrative battle. They've been losing that. They have a major public relations problem. Look at all the polls, guys. You guys look at it. I can send you the links later. There's a poll that just came out recently that said the more Americans learn about Israel, the more they dislike it. Right? And we've been seeing these trends where the generational shift in how people look at Palestine and Israel, right? And especially with millennials and Gen Zers, overwhelming support for Palestine. Overwhelming. Even among the Democratic Party, right? You look at the politics in Washington. You look at the Democratic Party. You look at the progressive wing within the Democratic Party. And you look at the data and the polls that they've been doing there. We're no longer talking about educating people about Palestine now. We're talking about sanctions on Israel. So Israel knows the public narrative battle is being lost. And not just that, it's being lost with young American Jews. in particular, right? And so they want to utilize this moment. They want to capitalize on this moment to reverse the past 15 years of progress that we've made, to bring us back to the 9/11 era, where every Muslim is suspect, every Arab is suspect, every Palestinian action, every Palestinian flag held up, every kufiya worn is a potential sign of domestic terrorism. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did yesterday when he made that tweet. When he said that we stand with Israel, we are going to fight anti-Semitism in America. Oh, and by the way, we've now notified federal and local law enforcement to be prepared for any domestic terrorism threat related to this situation. What? He put a target on our community's back. He made it clear that we're going to be approaching, we're going to be surveilling, we're going to be infiltrating the Muslim community to ensure that clamp down on support for Palestine. He's basically sending a veiled threat to all the masajid, to all the community organizations, that if you engage in this issue, you're going to be targeted. That's coming from the president of the United States. That's a very dangerous thing, right? And so they want to take back the narrative. They want to control the narrative by instituting fear in the community to address this issue. But here we are. We're going to discuss it anyways, right? Because that's what we're about. We believe in the haqq. We believe in the truth. And we always make that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan, and let the Shaykh do it for us. At the end, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah, wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put us on the truth and let us follow it, and to make recognizable to us the falsehood and put us away from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point of capitalizing on the avenues that we have available to us. And social media is one of those biggest things that we can do. Because one of the goals of the Zionist machine is for them not to have people talk about it. They want to pump one narrative and they want to silence the other narrative. And this is a targeted and coordinated disinformation campaign. There's no doubt about this, that they do this. And if you go through not just what's happening right now, years upon years of footage and comments made, a lot of times what they're doing is they're taking the crime that they actually do against Palestinians and ascribe that crime to Palestinian people, and then say that this is actually happening to us. And they, for example, just to bring this into context right now, unfortunately, there's a lot of Muslims right now that literally believe that Hamas went around and executed 40 babies.
Yeah.
This is something that they actually believe.
Question I have for people is, if 40 babies were executed, where are the 40 mothers mourning them?
Yeah. And so what we're saying is that, and when you look into the issue, right, and one of the ways that I came across this was there was an American politician who's a right-winger guy who was saying, I don't believe this. There's no proof of this, right? And it ends up, they dig and dig and dig. It ends up coming from a news channel called I-24, which is a known Zionist media outlet, unverified news. The lady comes out and says, well, it was actually told to me by an IDF soldier. They haven't really counted this as part of the death toll. And then, they contact the IDF, the department for outreach, and they don't want to confirm, they don't want to investigate. So what I'm saying is that now the narrative...
you know what Biden said today?
No, I didn't.
Biden had a press conference where he said that I have just seen videos of decapitated babies. I never thought I would ever see this.
Yeah. And they're lying because we asked for proof of this. I'm like, hey, show me the videos.
There's no
and
proof.
Any source you go to, it just shows like the people running away from the festivals. It has nothing to do, and that's another narrative, by the way. And okay, I don't want to get into each and every one right now, but what I'm saying is that while you're on social media, while you're talking about this, you need to be vigilant about the information they're presenting to you.
Well, before all that, Taher, if you were on a media outlet right now, the first thing they would ask you, Taher Herzallah, do you condemn the violent acts of extremism against the Israeli people? Well, how, and I'm sure some form of question like this is posed to Muslims in the workplace or around their friends or other social circles. How do you reframe this? How does someone who's posed with this question?
Well, talk about first why that question is being asked the way it is.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, let's let Taher talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this question is literally the first question you always get asked as a Palestinian on any media interview. And I just watched 2 interviews today where two Palestinians were asked the same exact question and they answered it in their own way. Here's the answer that I have. If a reporter asks me that, I'm going to say, if you think that the first thing I'm going to do coming onto your show and talking about this is to condemn Palestinians, then you're dreaming. All right? I will not condemn Palestinians for engaging in a liberation struggle against an occupier. That's number one. Number two is, if we want to talk about condemnations, who's going to help me condemn 16 years of brutal siege on Gaza? Who's going to help me condemn a suffocating siege that has left Palestinian children malnourished? Who's going to help me condemn the fact that there is no clean potable water in Gaza today for people to consume? Not because of this whole situation, even before this whole situation. Who's going to help me condemn the fact that even before this situation, Gaza had limited access to electricity, fuel, medical supplies, and food? Who's going to help me condemn that? Let's talk about that first before we talk about any response from Palestinians. That's the boiling pot that has exploded now, that you are seeing on television screens across the globe. Let's talk about condemning the actions of the state of Israel that have led us to this violent path. Let's talk about the actions of the state of Israel over this past 75 years of ethnic cleansing and displacement that have forced the Palestinian people and given them no other choice but to react in this way. So if we're going to talk about condemnations, let's start there. Then we can have the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, I was talking to a bunch of people today who were pro-Zionists, right? I mean, this is the first thing I always start off with. Do you accept decapitated babies? Is that something that you want to do? And understand that they're already trying to frame the argument that Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians are evil, barbaric, and everybody else is innocent. So what I like to do is this, and this is by no means a way that everybody has to do it. It's just the way I found to deal with it. I first ask them, what is your intention behind asking me that question? Why are you asking me this? And then they'll usually come out and say, oh, because killing babies is wrong. Oh, killing innocents is wrong. And I say, okay, great. Now we know why we're asking the question, right? So before we get there, I'm willing to condemn any innocent dying, but are you willing to do the same too? Are you willing to, for example, when, if anyone knows the situation, Gaza and the West Bank are separate, right? About 50 kilometers apart from each other. Right. They're separate from a place and under different governments, right? Hamas and PA, right? Why did a settler go and burn a 15-year-old child alive in Hebron, in Khalil? Why do they do that? Do you condemn that? Because if you care about children, if you care about innocent women, if you care about the elderly, then condemn it all. Yeah. Don't be selective in your condemnation. And usually that takes them back. That usually takes them back and makes them reconsider, well, why am I asking this question? And I make it very clear. You're asking because you're pushing a narrative.
Yeah.
And this is like sort of contradictory thing that's being played here, right? Because on the one hand, the media narrative is saying on the killing of Israeli civilians that no matter what Israel did or has done, nothing justifies Hamas's killing of civilians, right? That's one of the things they're saying. And on the other hand, they're also saying, this is the same people. In the same interview, sometimes they'll imply this, right? Given what Hamas has done, you can't blame Israel for its mass bombing of Palestinian civilians, for its collective punishment of all Palestinians. Yep. So they're giving, it's incredible, the cognitive dissonance that is taking place.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely and you know what, the other thing that's crazy to me is this. I was talking to a Zionist guy who was actually today, we were just discussing this, right? And he's like, yeah, we have to pulverize, we have to demolish Gaza because, we have to finish them off once and for all, right? I said, okay, calm down, relax, Shlomo, relax, calm down, right? And then I'm like, listen, what is your objective? Like, you want to, okay, so Hamas fights you. You say Hamas are hiding like rats in tunnels, so they're not actually in the public, but yet you want to punish the public to try to get Hamas, but you're fighting a war with Hamas, but you haven't actually attacked Hamas yet because they're in tunnels. So who are you actually fighting? I said, yes, you're winning the war. You're winning the war on civilians. You're not winning the war on the people that actually fought you, right? And what I'm trying to get them to see is that what they believe is in collective punishment. And by every standard, international law, the EU just came out and said what they announced about they're going to do is cutting water, cutting electricity. All of that is a war crime. Because it's obviously, it's not just fighters. These are people who are on ventilators, people who were sick even before the war, who are in the hospitals, who are on, equipment that needs to keep them alive. They are going to die from this. The hospitals are turning into graveyards. Essentially, what's going to happen, right? Yeah. But what they believe is in collective punishment. So if you turn the argument around and you say, and I've heard them say crazy things, by the way, if you really delve into the conversation, every single baby is a potential Hamas, they're going to grow up, be radical anyways, it doesn't really matter,
the stuff that
right?
they've said is ridiculous.
Yes,
I mean,
and so they
open calls for genocide, like straight up, no ifs or buts about it.
And so the idea is to reframe it and say, so wait a minute, you're trying to say that you agree in collective punishment. If that is the difference, then what is the difference between you and any other terrorist group out there? They believe that, the Americans or the French did something, whatever, the government, so they're going to bomb the whole place. They're going to do a terrorist attack. What's the difference between you and them? And then the conversation begins. What happens is you'll find them immediately going on the defensive because they never want to be caught in a position where they have to admit guilt or responsibility, ever. Because one thing they know, like he mentioned, the narrative that's happening right now among younger people in colleges, universities, in open forums is that the narrative is changing. Sure, they may not just love the Palestinians, but they're recognizing that the Israelis are not innocent in this issue. No. And they're the aggressors in the issue. And so anytime an Israeli or Zionist or Hezbollah has to admit that there is aggression and a fault at hand, they know the media, it will be used against them by tenfold because people have been waiting for them to acknowledge this. If they want to have any chance of peace or acknowledgement of a situation, they need them to first acknowledge that there's a problem, and they've never been able to do that. They never want to. It's a strategic thing. They have taught and trained not to acknowledge these things. They're taught and trained to dismiss it and say, well, we have to teach them a lesson. We have to pulverize them. They all want to kill us. The Arabs think. Literally, just go watch protests. People think this is about just Arabs and Muslims. No, they spit on Christians. They spit on other Jews. On other people. They don't care about, it's not about the Arabs alone.
About white supremacy, bro.
Yes, it's about the supremacy of a political ideology. Go ahead. Yeah.
And look, let's talk about Hamas for a second, because everybody thinks this is a scary thing let's talk about Hamas. When was Hamas established? You guys know?
In the 80s, right? I believe after...
In the 80s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. In the 1980s. So that means the occupation of Palestine predates the advent of Hamas. The struggle that Palestinians have been engaged in goes beyond Hamas. The resistance to the occupation was even before Hamas. And even if, as the Israelis say, they are going to end Hamas in this war, which they possibly could, they have the military technology to do it. Even if they ended Hamas, would that mean that Palestinian resistance would end? No, because the conditions that led to the rise of an organization like Hamas still exist in Palestine. Even after Hamas is gone, Palestinian people will be under occupation. Palestinian people will be under siege. Palestinians will be living under a system of apartheid. And therefore, you could only expect that the Palestinian people will engage in further resistance. So the logic here to make this all about Hamas and for our community to get caught up in this discussion really shows the lack of sort of depth of knowledge on this issue, right? We need to be very clear about that. Israelis, they're using Hamas as a means to further destroy and kill the Palestinian people. That's just an excuse that they're using. But the intent was already there. You understand what I'm saying? The intent was already there. And if we're going to talk about mass murder and talking about this quote unquote as unprecedented, Israel has engaged in multiple wars, bombardments of Gaza over the past 16 years. You guys are very well aware of that. At least 5 major military bombardments over the past 16 years. And that's not including the day-to-day drone strikes and other things that Israel is doing to the Palestinians in Gaza, right? And so they've been doing this time and time again, killing the Palestinians, suffocating the Palestinians. And so what makes you think that doing it again this time at a much more severe and violent scale is going to change the result? You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity, right? But that's what Israel is doing, because it's not just about Hamas. It's about ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. So once we see it that way, once we start to understand things properly in their proper place in the context that they're in, then we start to say, hey, we can talk with confidence. We can talk with confidence. I mean, I'll show you guys, I'll read you some of the things in their own words, what they're saying. In their own words, what these Zionist genocidal maniacs are saying, okay? We know the whole human animals thing that was said by the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. He said, we are fighting human animals. Another guy, Daniel Hagari, he's an Israeli military spokesman. He said, in Gaza, and I quote, in Gaza, the emphasis is on damage and not on accuracy. Making it very clear.
Yes.
Okay? The other quote I have, I'm going to read it to you now. I was just putting it on my Instagram, is an Israeli Knesset member. Her name is Ravital Gottlieb. She says, use doomsday weapons fearlessly against our enemies, shooting powerful missiles without limit. Doesn't matter what international law is. Doesn't matter who's in the way. Doesn't matter what civilians are in the path. Another guy, another Israeli Knesset member named Ariel Kalner. He says, right now we have one goal. That goal is Nakba. A Nakba that will overshadow the Nakba of 48. You know what's fascinating about that statement? Is that there's an open recognition that they have been engaged in the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians since 1948. When you're an Israeli Knesset member and you call for another Nakba, that means you already know that what you did in the past was a Nakba. So this is all like, as we say in Arabic, عينك عينك. You know what I mean? Like, it's right there. It's in your face, and they're saying it clearly, and we're giving the Israelis the excuse.
Yeah.
Because of Hamas? Come on. I mean, we have to be bold and courageous in our approach of how we discuss this issue, and give our Palestinian and Muslim brothers and sisters the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask you about something too, because I think we have to recognize also that people who are representatives, or at least mouthpieces for a Zionist regime, they are well trained in the art of presenting and framing arguments. This is not something that they do, casually in their spare time. They are trained on this. And I think one thing I would like for our brothers and sisters to know is that they will ask you questions and try to take you every which way, talk about condemnation, ask about irrelevant things, create red herrings. And the idea that I've noticed behind them is that they want to get you into an emotional frenzy, because naturally these things are deep to us, right? When it comes to innocent lives, if it comes to people, you have family members there, if it comes to Al-Quds, Al-Aqsa, the whole thing, right? It's very close to a Muslim's heart, right? So they know that. And a lot of times they try to goad you into becoming emotionally responsive to issues. And I think if you're going to engage in these discussions, you have to be prepared to know that this is what their objective is, to get you to lose your cool and then just spout out a bunch of stuff, and then they're going to frame that and say, look, these people are savages, right? Well, in fact, we know there's plenty of material that's out there from their side, but I think maybe you can talk about that a little bit and let people know that when they come with these arguments, they're very strategic in the way they do this. They're trying to goat a response out of you. They're trying to get you to compromise your position by becoming emotional.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good point. And they have to try very hard to make their points stick, because it's all based on falsehood, right? So any logical human being who looks objectively at the situation is going to be like, what is this? This is all bogus. And so they have to come up with word twists, and they play this linguistic gymnastics that allows them to essentially paint a picture that presents them as the victim and the occupied people as the perpetrator of anything, by violence, of oppression, of whatever. And so when we're engaging in these types of discourses, right, and we're talking here like as if we're debating, right, with someone who supports Zionism or with someone who's pro-Israel, right? we're talking here like we're not talking here like how we talk with our own family members, right? We're talking about a sort of a tense confrontation or debate or discussion that we're having with coworkers or with media outlets or whatever. You're in that situation. They're looking at you. They're waiting for you to crack. They're waiting to find an opportunity where they can provoke you so that you can say something that they can say, gotcha, we got you. And that's why that whole you condemn Hamas question is supposed to be that trap question, right? It's supposed to set you back. It's supposed to put you on the defensive. I don't condemn. Like so you start like getting tripped up, you know. And so the most important thing is, if the question is silly, there's no need for you to answer it. The question is silly. There's no need for you to answer. That's number one. You don't want to put words in your mouth that you will not stand behind later. That's number one. Number two is you take back the discussion by reframing the question and answering it in your own way. And you'll find that people in our community, you know, mashallah, we have some dope people in our community who are really good at this, right? They'll be, you know, you'll look at some of the brothers that work with CARE, for example, you know, in situations where they're talking about quote unquote terrorism and whatnot. They'll know how to navigate these questions that are supposed to trap you, that are supposed to paint you in a certain light, so that the audience of that show or the news show gets a certain idea about you, or feels like, oh, you know, that anchor got them, you know, he got them with that trap. And so it's important to have your points ready. It's important to be prepared and aware of what may come when you're talking about these cases. And also keep it anecdotal, man. Like, talk about your own personal experience. Oh, you know, I went to Palestine myself, and I was visiting Al-Aqsa, and this is what the Israeli soldiers did to my family. This is what happened to my friend, my cousin who was there, or, you know, my dad and my mom went after Umrah, and this is what happened. And or you know, I have a friend who has family members in Gaza, and I don't know anything about Hamas, but all I know is that, you know, their family is being bombed. You're not responsible for Hamas. You're not responsible for answering about Hamas. You're not responsible to condemn or condone Hamas. You're just a person who understands what justice is and understands that injustice is being done to the Palestinian people, and that you have to speak out against this, right? And so I just wanted to make that clear, you know, to the community, that don't feel this pressure that, you know, we can't figure out what to say. You know, it's just, you know, be who you are. You know, you're speaking the truth. Speak the truth as you know it.
Fundamentally, as far as at least violence goes, right? And I think there's a question we need to answer among ourselves is we need to understand where violence plays a role in conflict, because the Israelis have understood it very well. The Israelis understand the role of violence very well, and they know how to play that card. When we condemn violence, we're actually hurting the Palestinians. All right. No, I want to preface this. You know, we obviously, you know, because people can take a soundbite out of our podcast and say that, oh my God, they support violence. Of course, the innocent women and children, you know, the innocent. No one supports the killing of that of anyone who's not a military target. But in terms of the Palestinian resistance, right? We as Muslims, we all have to get behind it. If that's what the Palestinians have decided, that this is the best path forward for their rights, Muslims have to be behind it. I don't understand how the Israelis can all rally behind all the indiscriminate bombings across Gaza and the West, the takeover and the killings all across the West Bank, the takeover of people's homes, killing indiscriminately around Masjid Al-Aqsa in our holiest months, but we have a problem with ourselves, like, that's unspeakable how the Palestinians fought back. Yeah. Like, wait, where is your mind at? It's so defeated. This is exactly how they want you. They want you to be condemning your own people.
The worst part is this is the exact argument they made. Oh, they attacked us on Yom Kippur when we were celebrating and people were in the synagogues. And I'm thinking in my head, like, you do this every Ramadan, every Eid, every time there's a celebration. Not just the Muslims, even when Christians have their processions, they do the same thing. This is not so. This notion that the savages, they attacked us on that day, and let's be honest for a moment, okay? Majority of the IDF, the military never takes a day off for a holiday, right? Any country, right? This is stupid. And majority of the IDF is not even religious for the first part, right? They were at a rave, for crying out loud, all day, all night rave, right? In the middle of the desert. On a kibbutz, which is, by the way, Palestinian land, which is illegal occupied land, number one. But first of all, it shows you they weren't really in the synagogues, just worshiping and remembering God. It wasn't this thing. They, instead of doing the actual religious stuff, they had a, whatever they were doing. I'm not saying they should be justified in killing them or whatever, but I'm saying that the point I'm making is that this is not some kind of environment where everybody was in their homes and the military was, there was no military defense. No, every country has a military that is on guard. Plus, you have the Iron Dome. Plus, you have the Iron Lasers. You have all these other things that are going on. Right? The military doesn't stop. Defense never sleeps. Right? So this notion that somehow they took advantage of that is the reason why they're savages, right? Ridiculous. But in reality, what happens is this is a page from their book. This is what they habitually have been doing for the last 10 years, even more. Every time there's just forget about even a Muslim holiday. Let's just look at one small event. When Fatah and Hamas decided to have a unity government, how did Israel respond to that?
That's true.
Their immediate response was to bomb them.
Yep.
Another thing, forget about this. Let's forget about a religious holiday. Israel plays the card that, we're informing Gazans to leave the area now. We're going to be bombing. Go away. Okay, first of all, there's no way to cross. You can't cross into the Israeli side.
Yeah.
They want you to go to the Egyptian side. The Rafah crossing is controlled. Yes, it's on the Egyptian side, but ever since Egypt lost the war, they are not allowed to have any heavy patrolling equipment. They can't have any heavy military equipment there. The people that actually monitor the crossing are Israelis.
Yeah.
But never mind that. Let's say they would have opened the crossing, right? That was the idea, right? On the way to the Rafah crossing, what's the first thing they do? They bomb it. So you want these Palestinians to leave the area because you're being a humanitarian by telling them, hey, we're going to be bombing your homes. But then when they do try to leave, then you bomb them at the exit point.
Yeah.
So if you want to, what's more atrocious? Talking about on Yom Kippur or literally directing a herd of people to an exit point and then bombing them?
Wow. Fundamentally, the Israelis understand the nature of violence and that it is as innate to human beings as it is the consumption of food and water and everything that you need to survive. This is what they understand very well. And in order for them to preserve their livelihood, their existence, they've understood this truth about humanity, that whoever exerts power through violence has the last say. And ultimately, we as Muslims have to figure this out, that violence is not just an option, or the threat of violence should always be there. There's only Switzerland that doesn't have a military in the world.
But every citizen is armed, though.
Right. Every single citizen is armed. Every respectable nation that has any kind of dignity has this threat of violence that is innate to them. And if you don't have that, if you're going to just lay over and keel over every time the Israelis, massacre your people, then you might as well. That's what's going to happen. You're going to get wiped out. It's the inevitable, and that's what they want to do. They want to crush your hope. That's what he's literally said. Netanyahu said in this private interview on a video on Twitter. He said, we want to crush their hopes.
Yeah.
And they were asking, aren't you worried about what the West says? What America says and stuff? And he said, I'm not worried about anything.
80% of them will always support us. We have their support. They know they have in the pocket. Yeah. But here's the other thing too. Let's look at logically, right? I want to ask him a question, right? Let's say today all the Palestinians somehow got together from West Bank, from Gaza, and said, you know what? We give up. Okay, we can't fight Israel. Here's all of our weapons. Here's all the rockets. Here's every single thing. Here's our kitchen knives, our butter knives. Here's our books, whatever it is, right? Okay, now solve the problem. Do you think Israel would really absorb a Palestinian population? Do you think they would absorb a population if there was no threat of violence? I don't think they would. They've demonstrated time and time again that they don't want to have Palestinians there. So this is not about violence. They understand that when they commit, that what they're doing is endangering Israeli lives by occupying land. This is one of the reasons why many non-Zionist Jewish organizations have a problem. They don't believe that they shouldn't have the land. They believe that. They believe God gave them the land. But what they argue is that the way the Jews have taken the land now, the Zionists have taken it now, endangers Jewish lives. And that's the fundamental point, that even if every single Palestinian gave up weapons and said, you are right, Israel, we want to live the way you even admit God, last time Allah say, oh, we're savages, we have no way to live, we need to live off of you, no problem. Okay, they still wouldn't accept them.
Of course they wouldn't.
And that's the point. So is the violence really the issue?
No, and that leads to the next. The Israeli strategy is strangling them to the point that they're so miserable that they're at Egypt and Jordan's borders crying to get in, get out. They don't want them part of their society. They don't want them to even exist in peace. They don't want peace. They fundamentally, even during the periods of peace, they're the ones who are making incursions into the Masjid al-Aqsa and other areas where the Palestinians didn't do anything. They're just practicing their faith. They're worshiping God. They haven't done anything. And what they do is they want to stoke reasons to tighten that stranglehold on them, to make life as miserable as possible for them, to create reasons for them to take more land away from them. And this is their strategy. Just suffocation to the point where you're so miserable, you plead to the Arab neighbors, take us out of here.
Not only that, do you know how easy it is for a Palestinian to get citizenship in America, Canada, in other places compared to other Arab places? It's exponentially easier. Why? Because they have an agreement. They want you to be able to leave at will. They want them to leave. That's what they want. They want you to give up and leave. And they will force America and Canada and Germany and France and all these places to take them. They will take them over Turks, over Yemenis, over Syrians, over anybody else. They will be happy to take a Palestinian. Why? Because it serves their agenda. They know they don't want them anywhere near Palestine. That's the whole agenda here.
So another tough question is...
Oh, the Sheikh's still here.
I am. No, I'm learning, man. No, another really tough question is that, and it's very simple, but people usually ask, well, to Mort's point, which is very true, Palestinians can easily move to the United States. I don't know how it is in other Western countries, but the United States is pretty easy relative to other Arab countries. So why don't they just go? Take themselves out of this misery. Why do they stay there? I heard Muslims say this. Why are they doing this to themselves? Look, this defeatist mentality, how you were Sim, you were articulating, of even if they resist, dude, Palestinians are refugees in their own country. Have you ever heard of a refugee in their own country? Yeah. So when comes time to resist, how is it that Western Muslims automatically start becoming righteous and moral, a false sense of morality, a false sense of righteousness, and say, oh, then Palestinians should leave. Oh, why are they still there? Oh, the defeated mentality is so deep. We have to remember, this doesn't just go back 16 years. This is not from 2000. This is 75 years, right? Of this machine constantly building a narrative. And when Hamas comes out, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Now, even like I heard Pat David now comparing Hamas to ISIS and, Hezbollah and all that kind of stuff. The reason why Hamas didn't have to exist, the reason why it existed is because people have the need to defend themselves, especially when you're in your own home and the whole world is telling you, hey, how dare you defend yourself in your own home? That's exponentially going to cause numbers to grow. Look at these numbers, right? I don't know how trustworthy these numbers are, but let's just take it for example's sake. 58% of the people of Gaza are in support of Hamas's initiative right now in this war. 42 to 43% of people in West Bank are supportive of what Hamas is doing, right? So that means in the West Bank, it hasn't even reached half of the people that are in support of Hamas. In Gaza, it's a little over 50%, right? So how do you, and look at this hypocrisy, how do you tell everyone to leave, to say we're going to level this place because of Hamas, and half of them, let's just say, don't even agree 100% with Hamas. They're in this, look, people of Palestine have been living through this for so long. They're like, dude, we just don't want anything else. We just want to be able to breathe, kind of. Like, we're able to take like a quarter of a breath. We're able to eat a little bit. This is like good for us right now, right? They're humans too. Like, if they've been living on that for 75 years, eventually, if you see that the people who are supposed to be your brothers and sisters are actually your enemies, and in support of those people who are your enemies, you're not gonna be able to fight back. Like, that's what causes the defeatist mentality. But when we talk about here in the Western countries, especially in the United States, the thought of sacrifice, and I think this has to be understood very, very clearly, not because I'm saying this, it's just an observation that I have. The thought of sacrificing anything of this life we have here in the West is a nightmare for us, even if it is supporting the cause of Palestinians resisting. If we're not willing to sacrifice, that's what I've seen with Muslims, that pragmatism automatically kicks in, because if you have to agree with the Palestinian resistance, that can harm my work, that can harm this, that can harm my family, that can harm, like, what am I going to do? I can't give up everything I have. I go to sleep every day with a full stomach. I wake up with a full stomach, right? The first hour of that's just the way like, why am I going to sacrifice all this? Let me be a little pragmatic and not talk about this problem. Let me take the easy way out. And not only is it defeated, but it actually builds a crazy level of hypocrisy. Yeah. Because it ends up being you not supporting Masjid al-Aqsa, which is a part of our Aqidah. Masjid al-Aqsa, like the scholars of the past always said, it's not only contemporary. If you ever want to see the level of iman of the believers, just look at the condition of Masjid al-Aqsa.
The litmus test.
The litmus test, but also the meter. The condition of what's happening in Masjid al-Aqsa and the trials and tribulations associated with Masjid al-Aqsa, look at that, and that's a direct correlation. Look at, like, how big is Gaza? Like, people always talk about, Palestine, how just talk about Gaza and the West Bank. How big is it compared to cities in the United States?
It's like the size of a small city,
right? I think
25 miles long.
It's like the size of San Antonio, maybe.
Yeah, and I think all of Palestine is the size of DC, maybe.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah. Twice the size of Washington D.C. is the size of Gaza, and the West Bank. By the way, there's a misconception out there too that a lot of people think that the entirety of the West Bank is Palestinians. A lot of it's been taken over by the Israelis.
It has.
By the settlers.
So the reason why I'm saying all this is, look, everyone has to be able to say something good. I know that seems like it's a really petty thing to ask. It's petty. And it's confusing for a lot of people, because a lot of people think if you're supporting Palestine, you're supporting Hamas. And the way that the media has portrayed groups in the world, especially Hamas, is not people who were born out of this resistance and are trying to defend themselves, rather a terrorist group. And they're like ISIS. Muslims are going to have a very, very difficult time even talking about Palestine, because it's all associated with Hamas now. The narrative is crazy how it's so skewed that if you talk about helping Palestine, you're automatically helping Hamas, right? Yeah. And even if you're talking about just the Palestinian people in general. So we need to be able to say to ourselves, am I able to openly say something good about Palestine and the resistance of the Palestinian people? I'm talking about the women, the children, the elderly, and everybody. Forget about Hamas. If I can't do that, that means I've been conditioned and I'm in a very defeated state. And that's what it comes down to. So your sacrifice is, you should be able to talk about Palestine, number one. Do whatever you need to muster the courage to talk about Palestine. Then you need to build. Somebody else said something, we could probably talk about this later. It's a little more political on the level of the United States. People, I've been getting messages, and people in the comments have been messaging, the first thing you got to do is write letters to your senators. And the second thing you got to do is go to Congress, and you got to call them, and you got to let them know to stop this problem that's happening in Palestine. Those days are over. This, I don't know if you guys agree with me. Those days of calling the senator and telling them to tell Netanyahu to stop what he's doing to Muslims in Palestine, and telling the Israeli forces to stop. You can do that, right? And that may make you feel a little better. But this situation has gotten to a point, and it always was, the matter of Palestine, is the only thing that's going to stop this is mobilizing of armies of Muslim countries. That's the only thing that can actually put a bit of a threat on Israel. Other than that, dude, they're laughing in our faces. And I don't know if you guys agree with me. That's my personal opinion.
No, you're absolutely 100% right, Sheikh. But the problem with the Muslim armies right now in neighboring regions and across the world is that they see the entire issue as an obstacle. Like the whole Palestinian problem, that these Palestinians are a thorn in the side of them to make money.
Yes, dunya.
That they can't. This problem is now not a problem that is preventing us from making money, because they want to make deals with the Israelis, and they want to have all kinds of different economic trade agreements and stuff. And the Palestinians have become an obstacle towards that, because a lot of these economies are suffering. They have really bad, all kinds of inflationary rates and banking problems, and they see any kind of leverage that they can have, or any kind of economic trade agreements they can make with the Israelis as a way to alleviate their own economic situation.
It's not just the Israelis, also it's Americans, right? Access to IMF loans. It's a whole package thing. It's not just the Israelis. I mean, Israel is pretty much right now, even economically, Israel right now itself is in a bind, because ever since they had this overhaul of the justice system, many liberal companies and CEOs who are like very liberal in Israel, in retaliation, they pulled their money out and their headquarters out. So Israel economically is in a bind, but your relationship with Israel definitely puts you in good graces with the Americans and the IMF and the UN and I mean the EU and all these different things, right? But one thing I was looking at as an observation, Taher, I don't know if you saw this, but immediately when the war kicked off, right, they were showing scenes at Ben Gurion Airport, right? Flooded, right? Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen indigenous people, the minute war happens, jump on a flight to somewhere else? You ever seen that?
Never.
If you're indigenous, the last thing you think that there's nowhere for you to go, you have to fight. Only a person who's not indigenous to the land can hop on a flight somewhere else in mass numbers, right? Before you've actually even been I'm talking about, this is not from like, from Israelis who are living in Gaza. They don't live there, right? These are people who are living outside, right? The minute a little announcement of war, they were quick to pick up and leave. And to me, it's very telling, right? Because for a Palestinian, that's not an option. Why? Because he belongs to the land. The one who doesn't belong to the land, who's vacationing there, an extended vacation, he can bounce when he feels like bouncing.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have an attachment to the land. He's not going to, he doesn't have the motivation to sit there and fight for it because he has no ties to it.
Yeah, no skin in the game.
The Palestinian who's fighting for that land has a key that's 200, 300 years old. More than that in some cases.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing that you have to recognize. That people who truly belong to the land, they don't just get up and leave in the first instance of war. They don't do that. Number two, the other thing here that we have to realize as well too, is that it's so, the irony is this, right? Like I was talking to somebody and they make this argument all the time, right? I don't know if you've heard this argument. Oh, the Arabs have so many countries around. The Arabs have so many countries around. Israel just has one country. Why can't the Jews just have one country for themselves? So I was talking to this guy today about it, and I'm like, listen, if that's the case, I'm in Chicago, right? The guy was in Michigan. I said, listen, what if I just drive up to Michigan and take over your land and say, you know what, you white people have so much land in this country. There's white people everywhere. You can go to any different state you want to. There's so many white people. I'm just going to take it over. Why are you complaining? You have so many other white states. You have Nebraska, Omaha, Idaho. You have Alabama. Just go there. Yeah. Right, and this is but when you frame it this way, the irrational response they give you in dealing with this, and it's mind-boggling because with everything else, they've become they display some semblance of rationality, but when it comes to Israel, it's like they've thrown it all out. I'll give you another small comparison. Look at the Ukraine. When Russia takes Crimea, how dare Russia invade the sovereign land that belongs to the Ukrainians? How we have to support them? This is an injustice. Oh my God. Right? And now for 75 years, you're literally aiding people who have invaded the land and colonized it and created an apartheid state. Right? And now, where's the outrage there? So you can be outraged about Russia invading and taking over parts of the Ukraine, but yet in the same hand, you're supporting or entity for 75 years. Another irony. They say, okay, we're going to pledge money for Ukraine. We gave $100 billion, right? Just today, Biden comes out and says, we are committed to providing unlimited assistance to Israel. Why would any country... Why would we waste just if you're thinking from a non-religious, non-ethnic perspective, even just as an American, why would you commit so much money to another country that literally has nothing to do with you? Nothing. And this is what I'm saying, like the amount of just brainwashing and just unconditional support, these people actually don't, I'm convinced of this, they don't want to have a rational discussion because all of this ties back to admitting blame and accountability on Western powers. This problem starts in the 1920s when they decided to take people who were being killed in Europe by a European problem and transplant them to another area in the world that they have nothing to do with, and then they miscalculated and then the way to solve the problem is it's just the people there that are savages. They can't live in peace. But in reality, you created the problem, and any admission of this is a negative impact, and it dismantles this Western ideology that, we are inherently good, we're inherently trying to spread peace in the world, our system works, you have to follow us, we are policing the world, and all of that. They would have to forsake that narrative if they admit this big blunder they've been doing for the last 75 years. And that's why I believe they're irrational. Because I was thinking about this today. I'm like, how can you be so irrational? Like, they know, by the way, Americans aren't dumb. The American government, they know that, the number one country that engages in economic espionage on America is Israel?
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's a report. It's known. They know this. There's economic espionage that happens all the time, and they justify and say, allies spy on each other. We spy on on Germany and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But they acknowledge these problems, but yet there's this unconditional support. What would drive a person to do that? Or an entity to do that? And to me, the only rational argument I can have is that they are trying to cover their tracks of what they've been doing, this chaotic relationship they have with the Middle East, this crumbling control they have over the Middle East. They're trying to every which way possible to save that and maintain their hegemony in the Middle East.
They have to. Israel has to exist for America to have their foothold in the Middle East. It's in the center of the Middle East. They have to have it, right? So they're willing to do anything they need to have it there. The other thing is, look, I was watching Al Jazeera. It's out of all the media outlets, it's the one I see myself just gravitating to more with Al Jazeera Live. Just in the past week, but one thing that, and I want you guys to shed light on this, Taher, you can shed light on this too, is everybody knows that Israel's breaking international law on many levels when it comes to the settlements, when it comes to the embargo and the cutting off of water, food, electricity, gasoline, everything. You're literally just setting up a humongous disaster because all these people just need to be suffocated and they need to die, right? If they're not leaving, they're going to die. And when they leave, we're going to kill them anyway, right? So you're not actually sincere about making them leave. When they're leaving, you want to get back at them and kill them also, right? When they're crossing over to leave. So we saw Erdogan, we saw all these other people saying that we condemn and there has to be peace talks and they need to abide by international law. And look, that again is maybe just the way I'm thinking. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Dude, it's been 75 years. After 5 years, you should be like, you know what? I'm fed up with it. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say since 1990, okay? Those days have gone after it hit 2000, right? You mentioned, Sim, and you're right, that leaders have to think pragmatically of their people. They're economically bound. But how does it not cross? People claim that there's some rulers out there that have an Islamic conscience or Muslim conscience, and they actually care about Masjid al-Aqsa, and they actually care about the people of Palestine, right? Are you telling me it never crossed any of their minds, with some of them being as pious as people claim they are, that say, you know what, we're the only ones that can do something? What if we went down in history to break the shackles of this world, because Allah is testing me with that as the prime minister, as a ruler of a country? I think I should be the one that breaks those shackles, and I know it's going to be, quote unquote, a suicide for me and my people, but this is the price that we have to pay to free Masjid al-Aqsa. You're telling me none of them that crossed their mind?
No.
Ever?
No, never, because
before they go to sleep, like how do they go to sleep at night?
They don't. They go over to sleep looking at their bank accounts, and they see the amounts of incredible amounts of wealth that they've accumulated, billions and billions of dollars, and they sleep very well because they know that their country is, while there are plenty of Muslims who love Masjid al-Aqsa, who will sacrifice their life for it, there's just not enough. I'm not saying the Ummah is doom and gloom, that we're ruined and stuff. There's just too many of us that are still attached to the dunya. We don't want to sacrifice. We say we want, the freedom of Masjid al-Aqsa, but when it comes down to the actual sacrifice related to it, most of us aren't willing to pay
too
that
much
sacrifice.
of an inconvenience.
And these are all things that are mentioned in the hadith. We know about the Prophet ﷺ talking about in the hadith about how towards the end of time we will be like a scum on water, and we will just go in the direction where the waves take us. And why? The Sahaba asked him, and he said, because of wahan. And they asked, what is wahan? It's the love of this life and fear of death. We don't want that sacrifice. We've become so attached, every one of us, man. We become way too attached to the dunya, and this is an example. This is our evidence, just a mirror. Masjid al-Aqsa is just a mirror, and the occupation of Palestine is a mirror right back at Muslims, telling us this is your doing. This is not the Israelis' fault or the Americans' fault or the Taher Herzallah and all these other people, Ben Gurion, who are the architects of Israel. This is all our doing because of how nationalism crept into our hearts, and we allowed things that are concerned with us, the individual, well, me first and then everyone else second, that mentality to kind of creep up into our mindset, and we allowed, I make dua for the Palestinians every night, brother, I make dua for your people all the time. Get the hell out of here, bro. What is your dua when you're really concerned about yourself first? When you don't think about them when you're donating your wealth, and when you're holding back your wealth. Imagine if the Prophet and the Sahaba were in this time and they saw the situation that was happening right now, I imagine like they would have sacrificed every single thing they had. Nothing would be. They wouldn't hold anything to themselves. And I really believe that even though we give, we don't give enough. And I'm not talking about every single person. I know there's plenty of good brothers out there who are giving a lot. I'm talking about in general, right? Yeah. There's many good people that listen to the show. It's not a collective effort. This is a collective problem. This is not a problem with you, the listener, who's doing everything he possibly can. We're not talking about you. We're talking about the ummah itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And many people take this as an attack on them, that, oh, you're shaming me and stuff. I'm not shaming you, brother. This is the entire ummah that's responsible for it. Just look at all the countries who've made deals with Israel.
Yeah.
There's shame on them. Like, how could you make deals with this country?
I saw an interesting clip that came out of Gaza. A brother was saying, who was in Gaza, and he was saying, listen, we don't need your money. We don't need your armies. We don't need anything. If you're not going to come here and you're not going to, we ask you, he's talking about the bordering country, the Arab countries, do what we did. Cross that border.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not here to shame anybody, but at some point there is accountability on our part, right? There are numerous countries that border Palestine.
Yeah.
It's just a reality, right? And the countries that close their borders and do nothing about it, they are to blame for this as well too.
Of course.
Right? And then I think at some point there are individuals, because like it's not easy for people in Gaza to just decide they're going to go and break free of the border and run operations. This is not easy. They have families. They have children. They have, they want a comfortable life. But at some point...
And they're cornered, too. That's the problem.
At some point, though, the situation necessitates action. And I think that everyone's trying to delay the inevitable. That, you know what, hey, at some point, like these countries have to get involved. Muslims around the area have to get involved. Otherwise, it just doesn't resolve itself. Yeah. Right? I mean, we can write letters. I'm not knocking anybody that wants to write and bring attention to senators and people like this. By all means, that's one avenue, right? But is that truly going to be... I think that's more of standing up and making our position known that we are demanding something. But after demands, and they don't want to meet our demands, the people around the area have to do something. That's one of the reasons why, by the way, Mohammed Morsi was removed. Because the first thing he did was open the Rafah crossing. Look at what... You know why that was a slap... I'll tell you something. This, whether you like Hamas, you don't like Hamas, this is a slap in the face of all Arab governments in the region. Because they tell you Israel is too powerful, we can't do anything, they control this, they'll finish you like this. And here's a bunch of people that decided to coordinate an attack, and they did it, and they took matters in their own hand without a modernized military, without access to all these different things. They took action. They did what they could. Right? And then also Mohammed Morsi was a slap to the Arabs too. Why? Because look how easy it was for him to open the border. The second day he gets into office, he opens the Rafah crossing. He's like, it is impossible under my watch that we will be divided from our people. Right? And so if he could, people don't realize that, if he could demonstrate how quickly they could open that border if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And so at some point, I'm not saying that we're going to absolve the Israelis of their responsibility. They are largely to blame for what they do.
Of course.
But at some point, there's also I think we're talking about our individual accountability as an ummah. Yeah. Right? And we can blame and blame and blame, but at some point, I think what the point Sim is making is that how important is Masjid al-Aqsa to you? And if it's not, it should be, because as Sheikh Amr mentioned, it is a litmus test for the ummah. If you don't feel shame, if you don't feel hurt, if you don't feel this is an issue that directly relates to you, there is a problem with your iman, brothers and sisters. Whether you acknowledge it or you don't, this is a problem. This is a part. It's tied to your aqidah. This is something that Rasulullah made dua for, something that he was prophesizing, something that Allah gave him before he was even out of Mecca. This is not just the Palestinian people. It's beyond that. It's a waqf for the ummah.
What I want to tell the listeners is that it's not all doom and gloom. What I've seen, at least on Twitter for the past few days, is Muslims across ideological boundaries, across all different spectrums, all uniting in defense. It was very beautiful to see every kind of Muslim, no matter, whatever their persuasions are, they were all defending the Palestinians. They were doing their best. And, this is a battle that many people on an individual level, they can take, but they need to get educated about it first, right? They need to spend some time. And it doesn't take that much time. It's not as difficult of a thing. It's one of the things I wanted to talk about is the idea, this is a nuanced problem. Taher, you must hear this all the time. It must drive you up the wall. this is a nuanced problem. Well, no, it's not. It's not very complicated at all. This is imagine, just give them a scenario. Imagine if someone came to your house, kicked you, not into your basement, into your shed, okay? Imagine them kicking your family into the shed and saying, be happy over there, and how dare you get upset about me taking over your house because you making the intruder making a claim that this is part of their ancestral history, or that this is part of their heritage, that your home was part of their heritage, and then kicking your family into the shed and saying, hey, be happy there, and you know what, I'm going to make sure that everything is restricted to all the access to your shed, so that all the food and water, anything that comes in is something that I control as well. Imagine your life.
Yeah.
It's not very nuanced. I'm like, well, where's the complicated history in this? Yeah. Like, how is this? The idea that whenever I see someone saying that, it's someone who I know is at least has friends who are Jewish or Israeli, and they don't want to upset them. And I know this is a nuanced. Really, I need to dance a really careful dance over here, and concede a couple points to the Israelis. No, it's not. It's not a complicated matter. Taher, what are your thoughts on that, man? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, this discussion has been really fascinating, and there's many thoughts about it. But one thing I want to emphasize is what the Sheikh was saying, and what Mort was emphasizing as well, is like, look, this is the time for action right now. There are no excuses. And I've heard the same arguments this week that you just reiterated, Sim. That no, I'm just gonna I'm gonna forget protests, bro. I'm gonna go just do dua in my room and stuff like that. And for me, these moments of difficulty and trial and tribulation is the litmus for me. This for me what sets people apart from each other. This for me is what sets a Muslim from a mu'min apart from each other. Someone who actually wants to fulfill and manifest his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has directly given us to fulfill or manifest our belief in Allah, or not. So let's not pretend that, yes, obviously dua is the weapon of the believer. We should be making qiyam. Yes, absolutely, this should be a priority. Everybody should be engaged in dua al-qunut and salat al-isha and fajr. Everybody should be engaged in these type of things because we believe in this. This is who we are as Muslims. This is part of our epistemology, our way of knowing. But at the same time, that alone is not enough to change the condition of the believers. You have to take action, brothers and sisters. Like, the Palestinian people have taken clear and direct action to end their suffering. And whether you like it or not, you are part of this problem if you continue to sit back and watch the Palestinian people suffer. This is the time for people to step up. This is the time for people to engage in any type of action. I swear to you, I've had doctors today call me saying, Taher, what could I do? I had people hitting me up, haven't talked to me in years, offering their services, offering their expertise. Everybody who is noble and just and understands what this moment entails is going to be stepping up to the plate. Otherwise, I believe, and maybe this is too harsh, I believe you lack courage. There's no other way to put it. I believe you're cowards. I believe you are insincere, and I don't believe you are true mu'mins if you're not engaged in the struggle right now for Palestine. And this might be coming from a place of deep-seated emotions right now, because my family's under aerial bombardment in Gaza. But at the same time, I've been through this before, and I've seen what's happening before. This is not my first time that my family's been bombarded. It's not the first time that Gaza has been in this situation. It's not the first time that the Palestinian people have suffered in this way. But I'm tired of people who don't want to do anything and then come and lecture me about what the proper way of doing things are. Tired of that. Either you get in the game and you start doing this work, or you don't come to me at all. Don't tell me that you're part of this community. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ made it very clear in the hadith that if you are not concerned with the affairs of the ummah, then you are not what? Sheikh, you can complete that for me.
You're not from
Then
amongst
you're
us.
not from the ummah.
Yeah.
That's a very clear reprimand to the Muslims. If you're not concerned, then you're not from us, man. Don't talk about being with us. Don't talk about being among us in our community. And that's, I mean, subhanAllah, that's deep. That's powerful. That's powerful. And that's one thing I always want to emphasize. Like, look, our hadith tradition and the way the Prophet ﷺ manifested his belief in Allah is clear. When he said, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. I mean, this hadith, you know, if you witness an injustice, then you change it with your hand, and then if you cannot, then you change it with you speak out against it, change it with your tongue, and if you cannot, then you hate it in your heart, and that is the weakest of faith. Man, I feel like our community, a lot of people they can't even get to the point where they hate it in their heart, let alone start speaking out against it and doing something against it. SubhanAllah, man, and that's just the reverse. They have the reverse understanding of that hadith. Because if you allow oppression to exist, it festers. It's like a cancer, it spreads. I swear by Allah that if the Palestinian people were not occupied today, then the suffering in Syria would not have happened. If the Palestinian people were not under occupation, then the suffering of the Muslims in India would not be taking place. If the Palestinian people were not under occupation, were not suffering due to colonization, then the suffering of the Uyghurs and the Rohingyas and our African Central African brothers and sisters and Somalis would not be taking place. I swear to you, because it's all an interconnected system of oppression, a legacy of colonialism that we continue to deal with today. And so once we come to that recognition, then we can be like, you know what, this is what we need to do to stop the oppression of Muslims. This is what we need to do to unite. Right? And I'm really fascinated by this discussion that you guys were having about Muslims in the West. I think Muslims in the West have a lot to offer this ummah.
We do.
But have we reached the potential? No, we have not. We have not.
And nothing, even on an individual level, if you're doing a lot, you can't never ever think that you've done enough. Never ever go to sleep thinking that I've done enough. This is not the mentality of the Sahaba and the Prophet. In their worst times that they've done enough. You do everything you can. You always have the next day you look forward to, where you look at it and you say, Inshallah, I could do more the next day. Nothing is enough until the honor and the izzah of the Muslims is returned. It's as simple as that. Nothing, no matter how hard your life is internally with your personal problems or externally with your work and other, you do as much as you can. And at the end of the day, inshallah, that spills over, because the chances are you have people who are connected to you. They see what you're doing. They see your motivation, your love for the ummah, and it spills over. That love spills over, man. I'm telling you, like, when you love your ummah, like, that love spills over. Man, that's how we grew up. Like, we fed off each other. When we were young, we had, brothers in college and stuff that we surrounded ourselves with. That love always spilled over. Whenever you were concerned about something, that another brother was also concerned about it as well. And it's contagious. And everyone around you, your family members, start worrying about it, and they start thinking about what they can do. And that's what we started off the show with. This is what my son saw me. He saw me worried about Palestine. He's been watching on TikTok. He saw me worried, and he started seeing as many videos as he could, and he's like, I want to wear the keffiyeh to school. I want to wear it, and I want to show my support. And that's what each one of us has to do. We have to spread that.
Yeah, man. And the beautiful thing about, you mentioned thing about doom and gloom. Look, this is just a phase that we're going through. The rest of our life, majority of our life, alhamdulillah, it's not doom and gloom, inshallah, for the most of us. We go back to our homes. We do, we teach our families. We pray with them. We do adhkar with them. We teach them du'as. They teach us stuff. But the beautiful thing about this ummah is the love that you have for your brothers and sisters, even though you've never met them on the other side of the world. There's some beautiful correlation between that and the kalam of Allah and the speech of Allah, which is the Quran. The number one, when you're speaking for the sake of the haqq, the truth, especially when it comes to tyrants or people who are misusing the power that they have, what ends up happening is when you speak about that, it helps you understand the Quran better. It helps you understand where Muhammad ﷺ was. It helps you understand what the purpose. Let's not forget. Let's go back 1400 plus years. The reason why Rasulullah ﷺ, one of the primary reasons for him being sent as a prophet, was for objective justice, and that was by way of the Quran and Muhammad ﷺ being the final messenger. ﷺ. The precedent that was set by Muhammad ﷺ, there's many precedents. I mean, we can't even talk about that right now. We can spend hundreds and hundreds of hours just talking about when he got his revelation and what type of justice that was alluding to. But trust me when I tell you is that just the sorrow that you feel for your brothers and sisters, it will help you understand the context of the Quran better. And their happiness becomes your happiness, right? When the war of Bosnia happened, remember, in the 90s, how close did Muslims, dude, we never met anyone in Bosnia.
Not a single Bosnian.
But we loved them more than anything, but we never met them, right? And the brothers are mentioning, like even in the comments, in the chat, that look, Syria has been going on for 12 years, Egypt, all these different places. This has been a repetitive thing over and over and over because of injustice induced by way of not adhering to the justice system of Rasulullah, right? And obviously there's a whole lot of detail that goes into that. But why am I saying this? And our hats are off for you, we take our hats off for you, Taher, because your whole entire being, and I want to talk about that after, right after I just finished this portion, is your entire being is just about Palestine. May Allah give you Jannah in your family, and your family that's undergoing bombardment there. May Allah be with them and give them Jannah without any hisab, and but the justice that Islam is asking us to uphold requires lots and lots of sacrifice. So my address here, as you can tell, I feel the fastest way, even though everyone is responsible, and those oppressors, the Israelis, the apartheid state, is very, very much responsible for this problem, and they have to be spoken out against. But I would tell the rulers of the Muslim world, who wants to be the next Salah ad-Din? Salah ad-Din is still mentioned. Why? Because of his liberation of Masjid al-Aqsa. A Kurdish man who was actually pretty feeble for a big portion of his life and was actually afflicted and with sicknesses. But his body was not the thing. It was his ideas and it was his iman that mobilized armies. So he
wasn't even an exceptional commander either.
He wasn't. You're right. But it was the
But he was an
iman.
exceptional human being.
Exceptional human being. And what made him exceptional human being. No, you're right. And what made him exceptional human being was his love for Allah and his love for Rasul and love for Masjid al-Aqsa, and to make sure that justice is going to happen in this entire world, especially it's going to start with Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine. So my advice and my collective advice for the entire ummah to all of our Muslim rulers is, which one of you wants to be the next Salah ad-Din? One of you has the opportunity to be Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. It's going to require you to sacrifice everything that you've ever built up, but you will have this dunya and you will have the akhirah and you will be remembered the way Salah ad-Din was remembered. I promise you that. Because the whole world, including the Muslim world, who are more to blame than anybody else. When I say the Muslim world, I'm talking about those who are responsible for policy and those who are responsible for sovereign entities and that can mobilize and make justice happen much faster than any of us. They're going to have to sacrifice more than any of us, right? And if they die in that process, they die as shuhada. And that's all that matters at the end. But every single ruler of the Muslim world is responsible, but one of them gets to be Salah ad-Din. Which one of you is going to take that step? But if I can just...
I want to share something real quick.
Yes, please.
Because Taher talked about this earlier. here's a picture of Biden, who said, "I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children." And then a senior U.S. official told me that in his comments, the president was referring to Israeli public reports. Now, see, this is the kind of crap that gets already spread because
That's
the president.
wild, bro. It wasn't even an intelligence briefing or anything like that. It was literally him just going based off of tabloid material.
Yeah,
That's
and that's
crazy.
what we're talking about. Like, you can't reverse that damage that's done now. The narrative
No.
is now that Palestinians are beheading babies,
Yep.
right? And the worst part about it, you're the president of the United States of America. People look to your statement, and now the entire world, Israel takes it and says, look, even the U.S., the president, POTUS, he had briefings, he knows this, he saw videos. Okay, well, the world is waiting for these videos. What videos are you talking about? But that is not sufficient. I'm sorry to say, but the U.S. government needs to take better accountability for what they're pushing out to the media, because those statements have real implications in the real world, not just for Palestinians in Gaza, but also for Palestinians and Muslim children around the world, because that can incite attacks on innocent Muslims outside of Palestine as well too. We're already seeing right now that CARE has reported that they are condemning, there's a growing number of attacks on young children in schools because of this, for simply being Muslim or Arab or Palestinian. And stuff like this perpetuates that violence. It's a fact.
Yeah. Taher, how's your family doing, by the way? I know you mentioned briefly that your family's in Palestine. I know your mind and heart has to be with them, and I know because our hearts are with you after you said that. And tell us about what life is like. Or
Yeah,
what
subhanAllah,
saying.
I've been trying to stay in touch. I spoke this morning with them. Alhamdulillah, they are alive and
Alhamdulillah.
well. And it seems kind of crazy to say, yeah, my family's alive. It's just, it's absurd to even talk about it like that. But there are reports that some of our family homes have been bombed. And so that's why I was checking in to see if everyone was okay. So although it seems like those reports are true that their homes were bombed, but they weren't there at the time, and they have they're moving around to different homes to make sure that they're avoiding the bombardment. But the neighborhood that we're from in Gaza is just decimated. I mean, it used to be one of the like upscale posh neighborhoods in Gaza, but it's gone now. Like if you look at imagery, actually even CNN did a before and after of Al-Rimal, which is the little neighborhood where I'm from in Gaza, and where our family lives. And it was just a devastating destruction beyond description. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Before the call, you mentioned that this whole issue is completely consumed you, and what did you mean by that?
Obviously I work for a Palestine organization, so my whole life has been dedicated, at least for the past 15 years, to talking about Palestine and working for Palestine in the U.S. Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing. I feel honored that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose me for this task. But in these past several days, I've had this feeling that this time is different. Something is very different about this situation. I can't pinpoint what it is yet, but all I know is that what's to come is going to be very difficult. All I know is that what's to come is going to be a challenge. It's going to test our endurance. It's going to test our iman. It's going to test our ability to continue doing this work, because the whole world right now is looking at you as an enemy, as a vicious, bloodthirsty animal. And only the boldest and the bravest and the most courageous will continue in this fight. And the boldest and the courageous people are the ones who are going to be the targets for the enemy. And I have to think about that myself. Am I prepared for that? Am I prepared for what's to come personally? That's something that I'm going through right now. You know what I'm saying? And I hope I'm up for the task.
Absolutely, brother. This is something that each one of us has to think about. Where where will we be? What will history say about us? You know, there's
Exactly.
you know, it doesn't matter about like what people say and what your legacy is, but eventually, when the book, when Allah's book, the law, what is written about you, and your
Right.
relation to this period in history,
SubhanAllah.
what will be written about you when this
Allahu
monumentous affair happened? Were you just quiet? You know, were you just resigned to your fate? Do what you want, you know, or were you the one who enabled, who helped people, who was a helper, or who gave strength to people, who even offered a word of encouragement, who made dua at night, who offered whatever he had in his bank account, and gave it all away. Everyone has a different story that they will tell, you know, on the last day. And these are these moments that come once in a decade, where you're eventually going to have to answer some of these difficult truths about yourself, your relation to your religion, and to the Ummah at large. And then you see right now, you see the great Palestinian actors and celebrities and comedians quiet under Twitters and stuff. Like, oh, so you used the Palestinian cause to rise to stardom, but the moment came, and you're quiet, crickets. You know, these will be evidence against them. You know,
Like, at the very least, if you want to condemn Hamas, condemn them. But you can still condemn Hamas and condemn Israel's violence against civilians in the West Bank. I mean, in Gaza, I'm sorry, right? I mean, I'm not saying that, look, people have all kinds of opinions they want. They like Hamas, they don't like Hamas, no problem. But to stay silent, right? People who say they care about babies, they care about the elderly, they care about the handicapped, they care about the women, they care about civilians, right? So what prevents you from condemning the attack on Palestinian civilians and innocent people, right? Or is it that you only care about civilians if they're Israeli? Are you buying the narrative that Palestinians as a whole are not civilians? They're not humans. They're not deserving of dignity and respect. They're not deserving of human rights. I mean, the EU came out and said that what Israel is doing is a war crime. And you know what the funny part is to me, by the way? This is to like the right-wing conservatives and those right-wing crackpots. When the media comes out and talks about COVID, fake news, the media's lying to you, government's lying to you. Now, all of a sudden, they trust the media?
yeah.
All of a sudden, they trust it?
يخرب بيتهم.
Can you be dumber than this?
I'm so glad this happened in the sense that this showed to Muslims who were allying themselves with the conservative side.
Well, it's so clarifying.
It's so clarifying.
Yes.
It just opened up like,
This is
look,
like a furqan, bro, you know?
Yep.
Subhanallah.
and
Exactly.
alhamdulillah, bro, I was so proud to see Muslims not defending these jackals, these conservative jackals who've been cozying up to Muslims to get them on their side, to build this coalition against the LGBT and transgender indoctrination, which was, yeah, of course, it was a
real threat.
scary threat, of course, but we saw what they are. Now we know what they are, and we know how to deal with them accordingly, and we know that we can never be in any kind of coalition with them. We know that fundamentally that
Never
these
trust a
people,
racist.
we can never
Never.
trust them, because these people are either bought or completely ideologically brainwashed. That they can't. You thought that some of these people were objective individuals, that they could see. It doesn't take that much objectivity, by the way, to see how incredibly oppressed the Palestinians are. These people are either bought, and even you know who became a conservative commentator, Jake Shields. He's actually one of the fair ones
I remember that.
on Twitter. He's saying like, hey, where are you guys getting all this propaganda? Like, you guys are. He's talking about the conservative commentators. He's like, where are you guys getting paid? Because I want some money too. Like, how are you guys just giving one side of the story? You know, but it was funny when I was reading his tweet. I was like, wow, this is at least one brother, one dude who's actually trying to be as fair as he can and
Yeah.
objective
Yeah.
on Twitter. But majority of them, J.K. Rowling and all these crackpots, are just completely brainwashed by the Israeli propaganda.
Even people that are people who they look up to as thinkers, right? Rational people like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Give him hell, BB. Like, who writes that? You're talking about a war. And then at the same time, you hear battling and crying about violence and this, that. But here you are giving a green light to somebody just to say, yeah, go ahead and go to war. Go beat the drums of war. Right? But at the same time, we need peace. This is the same guy that wanted us to write love letters to Israelis.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I'm saying is that I think it was an excellent point the brother made. This is the Furqan, the criteria. It's drawing a line. And all these events that are leading up that we've seen so far, this year, the year before, it's making the divide even further and further. We know exactly where you stand. Believers know where other people stand on this issue. And it's becoming abundantly clear to us that there are no allies besides the believers themselves. Everybody else has a self-serving interest.
Yeah.
Hey,
exactly.
throw your Muslim government and politician into that category too.
This is why
They're
that's
self-serving.
why I'm not encouraging people to go talk to their senators and politicians, because we know where the left is, we know where the right is. They're all both bought by the Israelis. Yes, there are influential people among each that they may side with the Palestinians, and we encourage them. Yes, that doesn't mean that we give up talking to them and giving them correct advice. But what I'm saying is that the idea where we put our eggs in this basket and that we have to, this is something that we've been talking on our show for the longest time. We have to carve our own path. We as Muslims have to say that, hey, you have these different problems within society. We as Muslims have the solution. We can't build these coalitions where these people are fundamentally at odds with us about core issues. And it's not like something that's very controversial. It's something night and day, clear as day, what the injustice is happening. And you expect to walk alongside with them. No, we as Muslims have to come together, put aside our differences. We may have said stupid things about each other. Put aside all that stuff. It's time that we all coalesce around this issue, around Al-Aqsa, around Palestine. We realize the imminent danger that we're in. We can never allow our brothers in Palestine to be sacrificed, and we show to the world that this precious thing of Islam doesn't need anyone's help to be lifted, but it will be the Muslims that will carry it.
Yeah.
To be honest, that is the weapon of Gaza. That iman, that undying iman they have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is what keeps them alive. That is what keeps them going. It's fundamental. Do you think that they really believe that some Arab government's going to help them? Or the US is going to help them? Or Britain? No, they know firsthand they have to rely on themselves. And the first reliance is on Allah. But at the same point, when Muslims realize what the people in Gaza realize, then you're going to see a very different attitude. Because right now, in all honesty, Muslims, sure, we've been tested in certain areas. I'm not discrediting other areas. Like in Muslims in India, in Syria, in Yemen, I'm sure they've been tested. But the first people to endure this test were the people of Palestine.
Yeah, and it's all connected by how Taher was talking about oppression is being connected. You know who's supporting a lot of these accounts, these Zionist accounts? It's like the BJP Hindutva's. They're supporting. They're like, they're rallying together because they see a common enemy with the Zionists, with the Israelis, that the Muslims are a common enemy, and that they're lifting them up every time that they post something against the Palestinians, whether it's a lie or anything, or propaganda. They're elevating those posts.
And you know what's funny is that if you hear how Israelis speak about India, It's funny on Twitter. It's hilarious. They're like, yeah, we don't want nothing to do with you pagans. Your country's filthy.
Israelis
You're
don't
dirty.
like anybody.
And these guys are, we love your friendship. We want to be friends. Like they love it. You know, they don't. They would do anything to bend over. And the reality is that and people don't. And the reason why we're mentioning this is because it's a big deal. Because we're talking about social media. The machine that is behind that their machine on social media are these radical Hindutva.
Yeah, bro. If you look at,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's crazy, man. The Indian media is perpetuating these crazy lies about
Yep.
Palestinians right now.
Yeah.
Like it's like Indian influencers that are on like X and Instagram and
Yep.
and other and like TikTok are the ones who are perpetuating,
Mm-hmm.
and it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
I'm actually going to forward Sim right now an example of what I'm talking about, and it's appalling what they do, and they actually, it's people. And by the way, Ben Shapiro retweeted that whole 40 baby thing, but from an Indian account. Like who just put it out there, right?
Get out of here.
And so it's crazy to me. But I'll give you an example. So they're talking about these things, and what they have is like they will invent stories about like the atrocities that are happening. And watch, okay, I'm gonna forward this to Sim right now, and I want you to see if you can post it up on there. And I want you to look at this. I'm going to read it right now while he gets it up and running so we can kind of just get a head start on this. But there's a guy, Ben Shapiro, tweets this stuff to 6.1 million of his followers, by the way. Some guy named Aditya, right? He tweets out, a pregnant woman in southern Israel was found by Hamas terrorists. They dissected her body. Her stomach was cut open, and they took the fetus out of them with the umbilical cord and let the unborn child die slowly out of the mother's womb. This is what inhumane savages humans Hamas do to people. So one of this guy's followers, another Indian, goes, how do you know this? And then he responds, from my friend Avishai from ground, who has the photographs with her, but she can't post it. Like, literally, is this credible reporting to you? Some Pajit in India who has no idea, who's saying another Indian on the ground in the middle of a war in Gaza is on the ground there, is giving this alleged first-hand account. And this is stuff that Ben Shapiro retweets. He knows that this is not credible reporting, but he knows that it fits the narrative. He's got 6.1 million people following him, and they don't care if this is true or not. It fits the narrative, and so they'll spread it.
They want to believe it.
And can you put it up on the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And you know,
there you go.
Yeah, you know what the interesting thing about this is, just observing everything that's happening. This situation, how you know that this is a very monumental situation. Taher, you're mentioning this is different. This is very different. Number one, social media warfare has gone up astronomically. Number two is we're talking about a criterion, right? And this differentiating factor of reality. When situations like this happen, when's the last time in a war you've seen celebrities? Like, you had an image, an idea of Floyd Mayweather, best boxer in the world, and this and that, and then with the permission of Allah, he has this idea to support Israel. And then you're like, wait, that's what I was looking up to? Alhamdulillah, thank you, Allah, for showing me that clarification.
Great point.
I'm just talking about a small thing, right? Very, very small. I know, to me now, dude, I used to love Floyd Mayweather. Now he is more insignificant to me than me getting mud on my shoes, right? People who, what business does Justin Bieber have giving his commentary on world? Yeah, I always knew he was a degenerate. Now it's been solidified. Oh, this person, the president of the quote unquote free world, is posting things and tweeting things that have no credibility of lies. Oh, dang, I can't believe people actually looked up to him. Yeah, and he's the president of the free world. Like we have an idea of what power is. And situations like this that are monumental from Allah not only does us a favor to give us opportunity to see who has iman left in their heart, but also shows us what the reality of this world is, and personalities of where they are and who they actually are and what their actual value is, and how little importance you should be given to them. Rather, you're important. So Allah is doing us a favor by shifting these personalities, the favor and the awe that we had of these personalities, Allah shifts these people away from us. And this is a favor from Allah. That's how we know this is very different. And you have all these people colluding in these different countries, and you see like who's who now, like the accounts from India. I mean, like all these different things. You're like, man, this world is actually nothing, and Allah is the only valuable thing, and the believers are the only valuable thing in this world.
I think the least thing that someone could do now is that it's natural for people to idolize or like people that are in media and sports, right? But for me, the least thing that you could do for your iman in your own heart is to now make bara'ah from these people.
Yeah.
If you don't feel disgust and you still justify what they're saying about this, or at least try, listen, if you follow, I don't know, let's say you follow Floyd Mayweather on Twitter or whatever, right? If you don't at least try to tweet at him and say, hey, what about the Palestinian kids that are dying? Do you feel that way as well, too, about that terrorism? Let's just say you assume that he's just brainwashed by a well-oiled media machine and he can't see the truth. Have you attempted to try to at least tweet at him and say, hey, listen, can you have the courage to speak truth to even your idols, like people that you admire? Can you at least do that? And say, hey, I mean, because if you genuinely like someone or you genuinely, quote unquote, care about somebody, don't you want to give them a dose of reality? And say, hey, what about this? If you still can't even do that, right? I don't know how it came on my feed, but Madonna had tweeted something. It came on my Twitter feed, right? Oh, pray for... I'm like, you wretched witch. I literally tweeted at her. I'm like, you wretched witch. You literally want to tweet about this? Did you? Where were you for 75 years? I mean, where was... You're almost 65 years old. This conflict has been going on 10 years longer than you've been alive, right? Have you mentioned once any aggression? And you know, people started tweeting, oh, you Kabbalist woman, whatever. I don't care about all that. You can do what you want to do. You want to believe in some hocus pocus stuff in your basement, no problem. But don't try to make me feel guilty about what's happening. Don't push that narrative on my feed.
Yeah.
We should not tolerate people pushing. If it comes on I don't follow these people, but if it comes on my feed, I'm gonna say something about it. You're not gonna tell me what to believe.
That's true.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
You're not gonna change my position. You think because you want to emotionally blackmail me by some false narrative that I'm going to somehow just bend the knee to you? Where is your honor?
Yeah, man.
You have a platform. This phone here that you guys carry in your hand is a mouthpiece, not only what you do in this world, but it'll be a mark for you in eternity too. On the day of Qiyamah, people will see what you typed about. When people were dying and you saw misinformation on your feed and you said nothing about it, you'll be accountable for that.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a reality. You saw that. And you just casually scrolled by and then liked another photo by, I don't know, Michael Jackson or some athlete, I don't know, whatever you did, right? You just casually scrolled by it. When the least you could have done is say, hey, that's wrong. This is not true. What about the Palestinians? All you have to say is, what about the Palestinians? That's literally like a 4-word sentence.
Yeah.
What about the Palestinians?
Yeah.
Literally just shift the narrative. Fine, you want to feel bad for innocent Israelis? No problem. We all, I think, collectively can say, hey, there are innocents on all sides. No problem. Fine. But why don't you care about the innocents that are on the other side?
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, this, like, I was on my YouTube feed, on my YouTube shorts, I saw, you know, recently Joe Rogan talking to one of his friends regarding this, and he's saying, like, man, this is really scared. Nothing's ever scared me like this whole new conflict that's happening. And to me, because he's the most listened to podcaster in the world, and you see Americans are picking sides too. They feel the need to pick sides. You have on one side the LGBTQ community and BLM trying to take this opportunity to side with Muslims to show them, hey, look, we're with you, because they know that Muslims are desperate for getting some type of awareness to the masses, and they know that, so they're coming in support. And we see that the country was already divided. The United States was already divided. I'm only talking about the United States. Was already divided on so many levels with conservatives and liberals and Democrats and Republicans for such a long time. And now there's this new issue where people are asking each other about, hey, what do you think about... I've heard it at the store. I've heard somebody ask me that, like, hey, what do you think about this? And people you would never expect, people that mind their own business, right? That being said, what do you think is the future, as this continues, of Muslims in the United States who are going to be pinned down and put in a box and going to be asked to pick a side or asked about the side in which they pick. There's already in the United States fights that happen between pro-Israeli supporters in marches and in protests and between Palestinian supporters, right? And I think a majority of them were non-Muslim anyway, and they were fighting each other, fist fights and everything, right? What do you think is the future? I'm just asking you guys in general. What do you think is the future, in the near future, of Muslims in the United States based on this war?
Why don't we ask Taher?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's going to be, I think the counterterrorism discussion, I'll just show you right now, man. Laura Loomer. You guys heard of her before?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is what she just said. She just put out a notice saying, urgent Islamic terror notice.
Stay
out of major cities this Friday. This is a tweet that she just put out right now. She said the former head of Hamas just gave a global call for Muslims worldwide, and especially those living in America, to commit acts of jihad, parentheses, warfare against non-Muslims, which she doesn't even know what jihad means, this Friday. Hamas is calling on people in the Muslim world to sacrifice themselves, quote unquote, this Friday.
Fear-mongering.
Former Hamas chief Khalid Mash'al called for, quote, protests, aka jihad. That's what she said.
Wow, protests is jihad now. Okay.
Oh, so
that means the
so they're framing protest, just the mere act of protest, as terrorism. That's what they're trying. Remember, I was telling you guys, they're trying to gain footing after losing for more than 15 years in the public discourse narrative, and they know they're not going to win the public discourse. So now they're going to go heavy-handed.
Yep. Make up
with
stuff.
The counterterrorism stuff.
Yep. It's
try to get
back.
the community on that.
That's why even though they were saying that it was like,
tough.
yeah, no, sorry to cut you off. I know that they were saying that this was like the 9/11 because they were caught off guard type thing for Israel and whatever the case is. But it's all going to start with, look, the natural steps that we take for security is in itself an instillment of fear in people. For instance, when the masjids are going to ramp up their security. When people see the masjids ramp up their security, naturally there's a fear that's already built. People don't want to go to busy parts of the city, especially on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. People are going to be afraid to wear hijab in public. People are going to be afraid to wear their kufis in public. It's naturally going to happen. That's why I was asking this question. I personally think just the fact that security is going to be ramped up, Muslims are going to be like, and look, it's understandable. I'm not going to blame them at all for this. They're going to be like, oh, this again, right? We just got over this whole 9/11 thing. Right? And this again, do you think it's going to be at that level more?
So I'm a little more optimistic. I think Muslims have learned a lot of lessons from 9/11. We know how to navigate that, right? We know what our rights are at this point in time. Yeah, sure, they're going to try to put a stranglehold. But I think right now we're seeing, as he mentioned, one positive thing is that the demographics, the younger generation, the academic areas, there's the discourse that we're having is tilting. It's not just completely one-sided anymore. Sure, it's largely one-sided, but I think we have more avenues to speak. And I think we know, like, for example, if they come and try to talk about, terrorism or and stuff like this, right? It's very simple. Muslims know that, especially in America, that, hey, listen, voicing an opinion about a political issue that is tied to innocents dying is something fundamental to everybody. It's about how I think we've become aware of how to frame our arguments. The notion, I think a lot of times Muslims in the previous stages, we were a bit emotional, just reactionary, and we understood what that looked like in the media. Because now we're aware that whatever we do is scrutinized. Right?
But isn't that just a small population of Muslims in America?
No, I think for the most part, I think most Muslims have now understood. But I think what's going to be difficult for is the young children that did not grow up in the 9/11 era, because they're not going to. This is all new to them.
Yeah.
Right. So they heard about that era. Right. They heard about us being on no-fly list, about the Patriot Act and the wiretaps and the false imprisonment. They heard about that. But eventually, Muslims pulled through that. Right, and it did take. I'm not saying that that's easy by any means at all. But what I'm saying though is that we now know how to navigate that. And so if someone wants to come to me with some BS and says, "Hey, are you supporting terrorism, Hamas?" I'm going to ask them very clearly, "Are you supporting an IDF terrorist?" are you? I mean, we're gonna frame the argument. Do you care about civilians? Right. I think we have to be smart in how we do that, and I think if we effectively do that, we can stop their narrative in the tracks. Because what they want to do is they want to ask us difficult questions, and then you see they're terrorists. They sympathize with killing people.
They're all the same.
Right? They're all no.
Should've never trusted
no.
them.
They just want us to say that we hate Jews and we hate all this stuff and we hate America and all these things, and they will do anything to try to provoke that response from you or frame something. You have to be, if you're going to engage in these conversations, my simple advice is this: you don't need to respond to everything. If you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the temperament, if you don't have the ability to respond, don't respond to it. Let people who are qualified, who are familiar with it, who have lived through this, who know it, let them respond for this issue. Because you're not, like his brother said, you don't have to represent Hamas. You don't have to represent anything. All you have to represent is innocent people dying. And saying, hey, I feel bad about innocent people dying. That's what I care about. Do you care about that? A simple reframing of that conversation shifts it from, what group are you supporting? No, I support humanity. I support justice.
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it comes down to. And they can call you any name, but at the end, from a legal framework, it has to be something that is actually supporting terrorism. And no one here does that. Right? We're here talking about why a country is being bombed repetitively over and over again, why people are being denied access to water, to electricity, to food, to aid. That's what we're asking.
Yeah.
The same question that you asked about the Ukraine, we're asking about Palestine.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
And if the reason why I'm asking is because my tax dollars goes to this. And we don't have taxation without representation. So if you want to take my tax dollars, you're gonna answer my questions, or at least try to give me a response to it. And I think framing these things is going to be very important in the future. If we become overreactionary and say, just become cowardly and timidly and say, they're going to come to the mosque, they're going to be putting it down. Yeah, we lived through that, man. We've been through that before.
Yeah.
That didn't stop us from being Muslims.
That's right.
We know what extent they're going to go to. Right? And so I think be aware of it, but also understand how to address it.
Taher, as we wrap up, I know many parents are looking to teach their children with resources that show them how to understand the Palestinian conflict a bit better. Does American Muslim for Palestine have resources or recommendations or any kind of places where they can get better educated about that?
Yeah, I mean, our whole ethos and mantra as an organization is empowerment through education and action, right? So if you guys check us out on our website, ampalestine.org, you'll find some very good materials. I don't know if they're good for like teaching kids. This is good for like if you're engaging in a deeper discussion, on this. However, there are some incredible resources for kids that have been coming out lately. There are even like apps and games and things that teach you through gaming, basically, about the situation in Palestine. That's pretty incredible. That I could share with you guys and you could share with your listeners and viewers. And then also, there's publishers that have been producing a really good amount of books, children's books on Palestine, things that talk about the Nakba, things that talk about the names of Palestinian towns and cities and what they mean. And I mean, it's incredible. I've been buying them for my daughters and my son. And we just read them before bed, and it's really good stuff. So highly recommend looking those up. I think Crescent Bookstore is one of those that has those online. It's an online store that has a bunch of them. Yeah. Highly recommend it, and some really beautiful content and very well done, professionally well done. And so there's just to get the conversation started, about what's taking place in or at least getting some historical knowledge and education about what's been taking place in Palestine. So there are plentiful resources. There are websites that I can name. There's of course books if you're like a deeper reader, and someone who really wants to engage in this work and this text. I would recommend just a couple texts off the top of my head right now. One of them is Noor Masalha's book, Palestine, a 4,000-year history. Very fascinating book. It goes in depth about Palestinian history all the way back. The other one I would recommend is Rashid al-Khalidi's book, The 100 Years' War on Palestine. And it talks about 100 years of settler colonization in Palestine and how it's impacted the Palestinian people. So those are some starter books just to give you some insights. And then if you want to learn about the Nakba and what happened in 1948, I would say the most prolific work on this, of course, in Western academia, has been Ilan Pape and his famous book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And it's a really profoundly well done, researched book on the exact ways that the Zionist movement planned and executed the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people from 1947 to 1949. And so, highly recommend that. And of course, if you want to learn about Islam and Palestine, there are plentiful books as well. Dr. Abdel Fattah al-Awaisi in the UK, Ismail Patel in the UK, Dr. Hatem Bazian in the United States, his famous book, Jerusalem and the Islamic Consciousness. I would highly recommend it. Goes through and really does a deep dive into a textual survey of Islamic scriptures and text as to what Palestine al-Aqsa means to Muslims. And so I highly recommend those books as well, and give you a chance to really immerse yourself in this type of text just to understand like what's happening today and sort of give you a better understanding of the context of what we're talking about, in these discussions.
Yeah, fundamentally, we as Muslims have, we pray that this conflict ends as soon as possible, and that tomorrow is the day that the Palestinians live in peace and have their own rights that every other human is afforded in the world. But ultimately, we have to prepare ourselves for the long haul. We have to prepare our children and teach them to teach their children, and so on, so that Palestine is never forgotten. The Ummah is never forgotten. But that's not just the Palestinians, but the Uyghurs, the Burma, every area in the world that is being oppressed. It's a cycle of oppression that's all connected with each other.
It is.
And
very connected.
Ultimately, it's up to those of us who have this connection to amplify it. Because we Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whatever reason, whoever's listening to this show right now, you have this connection that other people don't. Yeah. And you have that responsibility. You've been given that. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gift to you in your heart. He put that in you as a lantern, a torch in this dark times. That you have this ability. You've been entrusted with this concern. And taking it to the world, and it's not that many people in the world that have this, and you do, and there's something to feel some kind of responsibility and appreciation for that Allah entrusted you with it above other people. It's as simple as that, because you've been given something that many other Muslims have not. Forget about non-Muslims. Many Muslims right now are more interested in the latest video game or the next show on Netflix that came out. I'm not saying that, throw down your entire existence and don't have any fun or at all. I'm saying that, you've been given a sense of concern above other people. Prioritize accordingly.
Which one of you guys is a LeBron fan? Yeah.
Not me.
The flopper?
Which one? What?
You guys are LeBron fans?
Haters. You guys know what LeBron just did, right?
Nah, I'm not.
No, what did LeBron just do?
Well, what did he tweet?
He just issued his own condemnation.
Of who? Of Israel, of Palestine, or of Hamas?
Yeah.
What do you expect, bro?
He's a scumbag.
Show. Another show.
We knew what he was about when
him and Maverick Carter, bro, together.
Remember when the China happened? When the NBA players were protesting China? It wasn't players. There were some executives and stuff, and then China threatened to cut off their endorsements in China and their ability to make money in China. Remember how quickly LeBron... you don't remember that? Basically, LeBron got really upset with the NBA people who were condemning China for their abuse and atrocities against the Uyghurs. And LeBron shut that down. He
Okay,
basically
I'm
said,
about to retweet at LeBron right now.
yeah.
No,
Do
and
you-
that's what I'm talking about. Personalities. Look, how many people?
Yeah, honestly, bro, go off on Twitter, bro. Like I've been sending
That's
my
what I
friends
do,
DMs.
yeah.
Yo, go
I'm
off
like-
on these dudes.
How
you
many
can-
people actually worshipped him and tried to compare him? Oh, the best ever, the goat, the goat. Yeah, well, now the goat just sacrificed
No,
himself. man.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will humiliate them. You know, I have no doubt. He's
Oh man,
He's the Adha now, bro.
appreciate you all. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
of course.
for
I mean,
for
thank you,
having me.
man.
I mean,
Listeners,
Lord,
please
what do you
smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Throw a comment in the comment section below with your thoughts related to the show. Everything, even just this comment section that that helps. Not the chat. The chat is separate. That doesn't help the algorithm. The comment section.
Just to give you, one last announcement.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're in the DMV area on Saturday, AMP is hosting a rally, right there in DC, this Saturday, and then also on October 23rd and 24th, we're holding our Palestine Advocacy Day and training, and then of course, AMP is hosting our annual conference in November. Thanksgiving weekend in Chicago, Illinois. And so we got some big things coming up. So even when this is not in the headlines anymore, I don't want to hear any excuses about people not knowing what to do, and people feeling at a loss of what to do, because there's ample opportunity to continue to engage in the work for Palestine, even when it's not in the headlines.
Taher, make sure you hit us up if you're ever in the Chicago area. We'd love to.
Chicago? Hey man, I'm in Minneapolis right now, so I can just always roll up anytime.
All right, man.
quick-
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we
5 hour
have you in the
drive.
studio, bro. I mean, to be honest, this is little Palestine, bro, over here. So come anytime,
Oh
bro.
yeah. No, I was just in Chicago 2 weeks ago. I was at the Palestine Festival.
Oh man, just come by anytime, bro. Anytime there's something to say,
Yeah.
just jump on the show live. We'll be here,
Yeah.
man.
We'll do a studio visit.
Yeah, open
use
studio,
this as
bro.
a platform, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, brother. All right,
But you
brother.
guys have that knappe though. Without
yeah,
knappe, it
definitely.
won't
Get some kanafa, get some Mystica ice cream, all that, bro. We'll get it.
work. Ooh. He knows what he's doing.
All right, brother. Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullah.
I just said LeBron, and then I included a video of a Palestinian baby being burned alive. They condemn that.
Yeah, Taher, you still there?
Hmm?